Welcome back, everyone. I'm Tim Kelly along with Justin Godsey. This is the Real Sports Talk and the Nation Sports Blog collabing, if that's even a word, for the third annual MLB 30 Clubs 30 Preview Special. Today we are on to the Kansas City Royals, who last year went 72-90. It was a disappointing season that many Royals fans came into with expectations that this could potentially be one of their first winning years in a long time. It didn't turn out to be that, and really the only positive to take out of last year was the fact that they were able to host the All-Star game and kind of put themselves back on a national stage. In the offseason, though, they went to work acquiring James Shields, acquiring Irvin Santana. They get Wade Davis in the James Shields trade. And if a few things go their way with guys like Eric Hosmer, Mike Moustakas, and Salvador Perez developing the way that they expect, then all of a sudden the Royals might very well be a team that we could see as a surprise playoff contender. They are managed by Ned Yost, the former Milwaukee Brewers manager, who is entering his fourth season behind or on the bench for the Kansas City Royals. So, Justin, crazy offseason for this Royals team.
Big promotion, big update to this team this year. I think this team is going to be destined to have a fantastic year because when you look at it, they officially found their ace in James Shields over the past couple of years. They went with Bruce Chen as their ace, and that didn't really turn out as well. Bruce Chen is now listed as their number 5 starter. But you know, overall, this team has really improved in years. You got the development of both Mike Moustakas and Eric Hosmer. Moustakas playing over at third, Hosmer over at first. And, you know, this bullpen has actually been really, really phenomenal last year, and I have the same expectations as they had last year. I think this bullpen is going to be back on top. It's going to be it's a very, very young team, and when you look all around it, this team has what it takes to get a winning season this year.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, and again, if a few things fall their way, they can be a playoff team. One thing that we have to keep in mind, though, in this division, the Tigers went to the World Series, but they actually had a disappointing regular season. They're going to get Victor Martinez back. I think Prince Fielder will have more power this year, so they're a team that's going to be there. The White Sox are going to be there. The Indians have signed Nick Swisher, Michael Bourne. They bring in Terry Francona as their manager, and the Twins probably won't be quite as bad as they were last season. So this is not a division that has gotten easier over the offseason. We begin at DH as we will break down each position for this team, and that's where Billy Butler, who was an all-star last year, he will be their DH. 313 average, 29 home runs, 107 RBIs. He is one of the most underrated players in the game because he gives you a great average. Last year he got the closest to 30 home runs in his MLB career, and he truly has become one of the better overall hitters that we have in the game right now.
Absolutely. Billy Butler has also been subjected to a lot of trade rumors. If you guys look back during the offseason, Billy Butler has been subjected to possibly being traded to the Seattle Mariners. The Mariners had a lot of, trade interest in Billy Butler. But, you know what, I like how the Royals were able to hold on to him. You know, this is the face of the franchise right now because Billy Butler is a guy who can go out there every season and get you up to about 30 to 33 home runs a year. This is a guy who does have MVP type caliber power and has the ability to possibly potentially get an MVP somewhere down the line.
Yeah, and look, that might be reaching a little bit, but he truly does have that potential. I think that he might have topped out in home runs, but he is leading in the generation of first basemen. I've said this about a few guys that might not hit 45 home runs, but they're going to hit over 300. The game is changing, and Billy Butler is one of the guys leading that charge. He's been in the MLB for a while now, still relatively young, 27 years old, I believe, 27, 26, 28, right in that area. Behind the plate, you look at Salvador Perez, and this is a guy that Justin and I had big expectations in KJ when he did this special with us last year. We felt like he could have a breakout year. Instead, he had some injuries, and he only managed to play 76 total games at the MLB level, got 289 at-bats, and again, he impressed in the limited time we saw him, hitting .301, 11 home runs, 39 RBIs behind the plate. He did a solid job, and entering this season, he will be their starting catcher. So Salvador Perez, to me, is one of the brightest young catchers we have in the MLB right now.
This is the future of Major League Baseball at the catcher's position. You're looking at the future of Salvador Perez as the guy who's going to be the face of catching in the future. Salvador Perez, I've been watching this guy ever since he was with the Omaha Storm Chasers, and mainly throughout the minor league system. He has a special type of power, and this is a guy who had a high 2011 year down in the minor leagues. He's not going to get you up to as much home run as you think he can produce, but you know what? You're going to get a solid batting average out of him, and that's something that you really need. The best year that he had was last year at AAA Omaha. He batted 340, in the short time he was down there. This guy has a lot of promise. He just needs to remain healthy. That's just his biggest key right now.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. He needs to remain healthy, and if he does not, Brett Hayes will be his backup. Brett Hayes last year with the Miami Marlins in 39 games hit .202, 0 home runs, and 3 RBIs. Prior to that, he had a little bit more success, but he's never been a guy to give you a high average. He's more behind the plate for his ability to call a decent game and manage the pitching staff more than what he brings at the plate. Now, at first base, Eric Hosmer is a talented young guy who took a step back last year, and that's not what I'm expecting to see this year. 2 years ago in 2011, in his rookie season, hit .293, 19 home runs, 78 RBIs, stole 11 bags, and it looked like we had one of the brightest first basemen in the game. Last year, he fell victim to the sophomore slump, and we've seen guys like Angel or Angel Baroa of the Kansas City Royals do that in the past and never recover. I don't expect that out of Eric Hosmer. I expect him to hit about between 285 and 290 this year, hit close to 20, 25 home runs, and drive in about 80 runs. And I think, again, this is a first baseman who's never going to be someone that's going to hit 40 home runs, but he's going to give you a better average and a solid glove over at first base. So I expect a rebound season from Eric Hosmer, the 23-year-old first baseman.
I agree with you there. Last year his numbers really declined from the season prior. I think Eric Hosmer has what it takes to become a 20 home run hitter. He just needs to add more power to his swing. He's more of an average type of hitter, which is actually really good for this team. And this team has so many young talents that is pretty much the future of Major League Baseball. And Eric Hosmer is one of those players that's going to lead the charge for the future of baseball.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any question about it. For some reason, if he were to go down with an injury, Billy Butler has the ability to play first base, so he will be listed as the backup, and hopefully that doesn't happen and we don't have to see that happen. At second base, there is somewhat of a competition between Chris Getz and Johnny Giavotella. I'm having trouble speaking here. Chris Getz right now is the veteran guy who has this position. He will be the starter when the season begins. Last year in Kansas City at .275 in 64 games, 0 home runs, stole 9 bases. He's a guy that you're comfortable throwing him out there. He can steal you some bases. He'll give you a respectable average, a decent glove in the field. He came back on a 1-year deal this year, which will likely be his last year, at least as far as starting for the Royals goes. But Johnny Giavotella is a guy who has so much potential, and Justin and I talked about it prior to this. He didn't show it at the major league level last year, but I think that this is one of the brighter young second basemen right now.
Absolutely. This is a guy who is really talented. Because when you look at it, Johnny Giavotella is now the main prospect in this Royals team. If you guys remember during the offseason, they traded Will Myers to acquire James Shields. And now that just skyrockets Johnny Giavotella to the top of the list in prospects for the Kansas City Royals. This is a guy who I've also been following because, this Royals team is just stacked top to bottom with prospects. And Johnny Giavotella is the guy for this team for the future. Because when you look at Johnny Giavotella, he's not going to wow you with home runs, every single or every other day. This is a guy who's going to wow you with batting average, a career .308 hitter, and this is an amazing young talented player. This is his career average is also going to be going down to his minor league days, where he really tore it up. I think at the AA level from the Northwestern Arkansas Naturals, where he just really exploded onto the scene there. But Johnny Giavotella, I can really see this guy winning that starting job. I'm not taking anything away from Chris Getz, who's a veteran in Major League Baseball. this guy, Chris Getz is not going to hit you a lot of home runs. He's not going to wow you with the bat, but I think you got to give it to the much young and talented guy who has been really dominating through your minor league system. That's going to be Johnny Giavotella.
Yeah, Chris Getz is an average player. That's what he is. Those type of guys are on every MLB roster. And he'll begin the year as a starter, but I would not be surprised if, like you said, Giavotella ultimately transcends and takes that spot over at second base. At shortstop, you have Alcides Escobar, who was one of the main guys that they got back in the Zach Greinke deal from the Milwaukee Brewers a few years ago. Escobar last year, he hit close to 300 at 293. This was really his best overall season batting. The 2 seasons prior to that, he had hit 235 and 254. He's never going to be a guy who gives you a lot of pop. He'll give you about 50 RBIs in that area. But where he is dangerous is on the base paths. 2 years ago, stole 26 bases, and then last year stole 35. In the minor leagues, he was a base-stealing machine, stole 42 at AAA Milwaukee. So he is very dangerous on the base paths, and he's a guy that sets the table at the top of this lineup, and then you wait for your bigger bats like Billy Butler, like Eric Hosmer, like a couple other guys we'll get to later on. You wait for them to drive this guy in.
This is Alexi Ramirez Jr. right here, because you know what? This guy really reminds me of Alexi Ramirez of the Chicago White Sox. This guy plays fantastic baseball, and like you said, Tim, this guy is not going to wow you with home runs. This guy is going to wow you with on base percentage. This guy is always on base. He's dangerous on the base path. This guy has the speed of a Michael Bourne. He has the hitting tools of an Alexi Ramirez. This is why I look at him as, Alexi Ramirez Jr., because this guy is just phenomenal, really entertaining guy to watch.
Now, one of the guys that we looked at as one of the potential backups for this team is Tony Abreu, Bobby Abreu's brother, who was actually waived by the Royals this week. He will be going and reporting to the San Francisco Giants. So instead, Irving Falou, who is more of a natural second baseman, and he played 24 games last year, hit 341, 0 home runs, 7 RBIs, was caught stealing twice in 2 attempts. He will end up being the main backup at shortstop. My guess is that Chris Getz, Johnny Giavotella, they could potentially even get some looks in this infield, but Falou will take on a bigger role, not only at the shortstop, backing up Escobar, but also at third base. That's one of the areas where I have a little bit of concern, is the lack of for sure depth, the lack of a veteran on this team. And if Giavotella ultimately does take over second, then Chris Getz kind of gives you that veteran presence on this bench. So maybe that ultimately is what is best for this Royals team. Now at third base, you have Mike Moustakas, another guy who fell into that sophomore slump batting average-wise last year. He's still at 20 home runs, 73 RBIs, but 242 is a rapid decline from the 287 that he hit 2 years ago. And the thing that really killed him was a rough second half, especially in August and September, where his batting average took a dip and his stats ultimately never recovered from it. I think that, Justin, I think this is a guy you still see hit about 280 this year, 22 home runs right in that area, 70 RBIs. He's a really solid third baseman.
Power went up last year, but average went down last year. I think this is a guy this is my favorite player on this Kansas City Royals team. I've been following this guy through college. I know he played a little bit of minor league. He played minor league baseball, but he played a little bit of college baseball with Arizona State. One of the most exciting third basemen in Major League Baseball. Mike Moustakas has the power to reach up to 25 to 26 home runs a year. I don't think on a very good season, Mike Moustakas could possibly somewhere down the line be able to hit 30, but you know what? He has got to remain consistent all year. He just can't, his last year with his sophomore slump, he went from a 263 batting average in 2011, went down and lost 20 points and went back down to 242. He just got to be consistent all year in order to be, to be a top 10 or a top, third baseman in Major League Baseball.
Alex Gordon, who formerly played third base, was a former top prospect of this team. He never really panned out to be the superstar that they ultimately intended him to be. But moving into left field, he's become a pretty solid, reliable player. In 2011, he hit 303, 23 home runs, 87 RBIs, stole 17 bags. That's solid production. It might not be superstar level, but it's all-star type level. Last year, while he still had a good year, 294, 14 home runs, 72 RBIs, 10 stolen bases. I think if you can get the production out of Alex Gordon in between what you got the last 2 years, so if you can get him to hit about 297, see about 18 home runs, 80 RBIs, then, man, you're getting a good, solid amount of production out of Alex Gordon. And if you get better than that, then that's even better. He's reaching the peak of his career at about 28 years old right now. And he's someone that, again, this team is littered with talented players. Not only Hosmer, not only Moustakas, not only Perez, but you look at some of the guys who are former top prospects on this team, like Alex Gordon, like Jeff Francoeur. There is just so much talent that this Kansas City Royals team possesses, and Alex Gordon's just another one of those guys.
I want to say just another one of those guys. I think this is a guy who's going to shine in the outfield for this team, because this guy not only does great hitting, he does great defensive work, because if you look at last year, this guy was a human highlight reel, and I think this guy is going to be, right now, it's in competition. If you look at the face of the franchise, you can really look at either Alex Gordon, or you can even look at Billy Butler, and you got to look at the captain, you got to look at Billy Butler for right now, but Alex Gordon does shine both defensively and also when he's hitting. Last year, he hit 14 home runs, 72 RBIs, and batted .294, a really fantastic season. And this guy, he's not an injury. He's not injury. And this is a guy who's going to be playing outfield, every day for the Royals, and that's what they really need.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Backing him up, and really the fourth outfielder of this team will be Jared Dyson. Dyson last year at AAA Omaha, and he also played at the MLB level Kansas City Royals for 102 games last year. Hit .260, 0 home runs, 9 RBIs. Stole 30 bases, though, in AAA in 2011. Stole 38 bases. This is a guy who has a ton of speed off of the bench. They've also signed Endy Chavez to a minor league deal, so he potentially could be someone you see as a defensive replacement. But as for, if you ever need a pinch runner, Jared Dyson is one of the best guys in the MLB on a bench that has the ability to come out and steal you a base. You also look at David Lowe, who is a potential backup for this team as well. So there's no doubt about it. This team has a solid backup in Jared Dyson. Now in center field, Lorenzo Cain will be the starter. Cain last season spent 61 games at the MLB level, hitting .266, 7 home runs, 31 RBIs. He's another very talented player on this team. He got hurt in the outfield last year, but I expect Lorenzo Cain to put together a pretty solid season for the Kansas City Royals this year. Another guy that came over in the Zach Greinke deal a few years ago.
I like this because when you looked at Lorenzo Cain last year, his power just went right up because, when he was throughout his major league career, he has not been signified as a power hitter. I'm really surprised by the way he has, updated his swing, and really, his hitting mechanics just went way up. And, 7 home runs, 31 RBIs, and, his .266 average, to me, was pretty low last year for him. I think he has a lot of potential to reach up to batting .301, possibly at a high of .305. He just needs to, focus more on hitting, basic hitting, try to get his on-base percentage up more. And they have their backup in Gerard Dyson, who's also kind of Lorenzo Cain. You can really compare these two together because both of these guys, they don't bring a lot of pop to each other, but they bring this nice solid average, which they were both low. I think both players need to improve on their swing a little bit more and just go out there and play regular baseball. And I think these two guys are going to be two future starters for the Kansas City Royals.
One guy that, if he repeats what he did last year, might not be a starter for much longer on this team, that is Jeff Francoeur, hitting .235, 16 home runs, 49 RBIs, and got caught 7 out of 11 times, stealing. He needs to get a lot closer to the 2011 Jeff Francoeur that hit .285, 20 home runs, 87 RBIs. He has the potential. He's done it before to hit close to 30 home runs. I don't think he'll do that, but something that he really has become better at. I think he's gotten a little bit leaner since his days in Atlanta and even in New York. Is he's just been able to thrive in Kansas City by becoming a good all-around ball player, similar to Alex Gordon. You want to see the average back up, 20, 23 home runs, maybe in a very good year for him. And you want to see him have a lot more success on the base pass or be more cautious if he's not going to have that type of success that he had in 2011.
This is another player that really fell down last year. This is another decline last year because if you guys look at the numbers of Frank Gore in 2011, he batted .285, and then in 2012 it was just awful. He batted .235. He just needs to, it needs a big improvement here because I think this Royals team is going to be the team of the future right now because look at their all-around talent. They have Gordon, Butler, Perez, and I think Jeff Francoeur, who's going to bring in that veteran leadership to this young team, who has the major league experience, who has had, great experience, and can bring it over and, help out these younger guys on this team. And I think Jeff Francoeur has got to be that guy this year to really step up overall.
I think when you talk about this line, you talk about the potential, but we also talk about, despite how good guys like Billy Butler were last year, you talk about Eric Hosmer, Mike Moustakas, Jeff Francoeur, they all need to get back to the form that we saw 2 years ago and not the form that we saw last year if this team is going to have one of those winning seasons and they're going to even potentially try and reach the playoffs this year. That's what they're going to have to do. James Shields joins this Tampa Bay Rays team, and he is someone that when he's on is a legitimate ace. He is a workhorse. He's now gone 6 straight seasons over 200 innings. That's pretty much his entire MLB career where he's been in the MLB for a full season. And coming over from Tampa Bay, last year he had an inconsistent season, ended up 15-10 with a 3.52 ERA. A lot of that, though, is because he got hot late in the season. He really struggled for a majority of the year. And if he can get back to the 2011 James Shields that had a 2.82 ERA, won 16 games, and then led the MLB with 11 complete games, close to 250 total innings, the Tampa Bay Rays have found, or the Kansas City Royals have found themselves a legitimate ace.
This is their ace right now. This team is just really went into this offseason really looking for pitching. You know what? They did give up their top prospect in Will Myers, and that's probably going to end up hurting them somewhere down the line if Will Myers does actually come out to be a top player in Major League Baseball, kind of like a Bryce Harper, kind of like a Mike Trout. But you know what? I really like what they got in return also because they also got Wade Davis. They're getting James Shields. James Shields, to be honest with you guys remember last year doing our awards picks, I picked James Shields to win the American League Cy Young. And it really bit me in the butt right there. And I hope that James Shields can get back into a groove where we saw the 2007, 2008, going way back. But that's what they really need. They need consistency out of him. He needs to get back into the groove than what we saw the season prior, getting more innings on his belt.
One guy that had a completely 2 different seasons last year was Jeremy Guthrie. Began the season after being traded from Colorado over to from Baltimore over to Colorado. He began the season in Colorado, went 3-9, and much like the rest of his team, he's flat out sucked for a majority of the year. 6.35 ERA. He got moved to the bullpen, and things went downhill. Kansas City was able to pick him up, and he turned his season around. Ended up going 5-3 with a 3.16 ERA. Pitched a combined record of 8-12 with a 4.76 ERA. It was enough for him to earn a 3-year, $25 million deal, which I think is massively overpaying for Jeremy Guthrie. But at the same time, he's going to give you the innings. There's no question about that. But only 3 times in his career has he had an ERA under 4. And it hasn't been too far under 4. I think he's a guy that is more like a number 3 or 4 starter in a legitimate rotation. And that's where this team has questions because there's so many guys on this team, both in the lineup and in the bullpen, that have the potential to do things, but you're not sure what you're getting heading into 2013.
I agree with you there, Tim. I was really surprised. Right now, if you look at last year when we were previewing, the number 2 pitcher on this team was Jonathan Sanchez. And right now, I'd rather take Jeremy Guthrie over Jonathan Sanchez. But because if you look at it, Jonathan Sanchez has been on a major decline since his last season with the San Francisco Giants. Coming over to the Royals, did not have it only last year, I think, half of the season. Then end up getting traded over to the Colorado Rockies, and Jeremy Guthrie going to be coming over here. I like the move right now because when you look at it, I think Jeremy Guthrie does have, a lot of potential to have a bounce-back season and really lower down this ERA. He just needs to have the consistency is going to be his thing right now, and that's what they really need. They need Jeremy Guthrie to really step up this year if this Royals team is going to be a legit contender.
And they need, the same thing goes for the number 3 starter, Irvin Santana, who went 9-13 with a 5.16 ERA last year, 178 innings. Prior to that, he had always been kind of a guy that had a ton of talent, and year in, year out, you didn't know what you're going to get. He's had years where he's had 5.76 ERAs. He's had years where he's had 3.92. And then in 2011, he probably had his best total season, pitched close to 230 innings, went 11-12, but he had a 3.38 ERA through 4 complete games, and even threw a perfect game, I think it was. Or no, it was a no-hitter. He threw a no-hitter that season. We even made a video about it back in the old days of this show. And he's not going to replicate that season again, but if he can have a 3.50 or a 3.60 ERA, I think that is what the Royals can hope for in 2013.
Now, it was really surprising that the Angels decided to let him go, but you know what? It was pretty much coming because his time with the Angels was really dwindling down. You know, he's been having a declining performance with them, and plus he was due $13 million at the end of the season. And you know what? It was just that money deal. They didn't want to spend $13 million on a guy who last year went 9-13 with an ERA in the 5s. That's just not going to cut it with this Angels team, which really improved this offseason as well. But you know what? We got Irvin Santana, kind of like Jeremy Guthrie. Consistency is going to be a big factor. And if this team is really going to contend, I'm pretty much going to repeat myself like Guthrie. They need Irvin Santana. They need Jeremy Guthrie to, come in here and play A-plus baseball, because I have a good feeling that this Royals team is really going to be a legit contender this year. They just really need that Irvin Santana back from 2010. They really need to bring that. He really needs to concentrate and try to get that ERA back down to the 3s.
Yeah, he does need to do that. And at number 4, they're kind of taking a risk because Wade Davis was once a top pitching prospect around 2007, 2008, looked very good in the minor leagues. And then he came up to the major leagues, had a respectable first season in 2009, and it went downhill from there. 2011 had a 4.45 ERA, and it was clear that the Rays had a surplus of pitching, which is why they ultimately ended up packaging Shields and Davis, both that and monetary reasons. They ended up trading both of them away, and Wade Davis found himself last year finally, but it was not as a starter. He found himself in the bullpen, went 3-0 with a 2.43 ERA in 54 games, 70 innings, had a tremendous season. The Royals are banking that he can stretch that arm back out and become a starter again. I think the best thing to say with Wade Davis is that even if he has success, he's not a guy that I would throw more than 6 innings in most games, because going from a bullpen role back into a starter, you're setting yourself up for a big-time arm injury if he goes right away back into trying to throw 7 or 8 inning games, even if he does have success. And he's never really had great success as a starter in the MLB to begin with. So can he be a solid number 4 starter if he gives them a 3.90, 3.80 ERA? Sure, he can, but I still think that the best value overall for Wade Davis might be in the bullpen, just maybe not the best value to this Kansas City Royals team.
I think Wade Davis has a lot riding on it this year, because I think Wade Davis has what it takes to go above and beyond than what he saw last year. I think Wade Davis could be, a guy who can even win you about 14 to 15 games a season. I'll be really satisfied with that even. You know what? I think Wade Davis, like I said, he has what it takes. He just needs to. It's just that arm injury, like you said, it's like a big risk factor right now. You don't want to overdo it, but you know what? I think it's really comfortable that they put him low in the rotation right now, and you can pretty much work both ways here with Wade Davis. But you know what? I feel right at home with him being at number 4 in the rotation.
If things don't work out for Wade Davis and they ultimately do move him to a bullpen, it's a pretty good bullpen the Royals have. If they move him there, then they have 2 other potential starters between Bruce Chen and Luke Hochevar, who are fighting for the spot. You look at Bruce Chen first, the veteran. He's been in the MLB for a very long time, since the late 90s. I remember watching him in Philly. I mean, he's been all around the MLB for quite some time now. And the thing about Bruce Chen is he's never really been a very good starter, but he's always been a guy that's been a back end of the rotation guy who will give you a respectable amount of innings, and you hope that once in a while he's been a guy who's giving you an ERA in the high 3s, low 4s. That's good enough for your number 5. Last year he gave you a 5.07 ERA, and even though he pitched close to 200 innings, that's not good enough.
Also, I was really surprised with the decline on how Ned Yost decided to plan it out with their pitching rotation. You go from Bruce Chen being their number 1 starter for, I think last year he was the opening day starter, and he goes from number 1 all the way back down to number 5, and he could even potentially probably end up losing, because when you look at it, there are 3 other potential top starters in this team that's also in contention of getting a pitch rotation, being in the pitch rotation. That's Luis Mendoza, Luke Hochevar, and I think his name's Will Smith too. And you know what? It's up in the air right now. It's all about who's going to go out there during spring training and really impress Ned Yost and the rest of the pitching staff.
Yeah, and you look at the two other guys. Look at Luis Mendoza, who's done actually a pretty good job in the bullpen, and then Luke Hochevar. He's a bust. There's no other way to put it. I believe he was a number 1 pick. He's a first-round pick. They had huge expectations, and he's never lived up to it. 8-16 record, 573. He's come up in the era of very bad teams for this Kansas City Royals team, and he has been really one of the guys who's just continued on that type of baseball for this team. And I think that really it's time for a change of scenery for Luke Hochevar, especially if he does not make the rotation. He's becoming relatively expensive. He filed for arbitration. He's becoming to the point where it's just not worth having him on this team. If he doesn't make the rotation and they decide that they do not need him in the bullpen, I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to designate him for assignment at some point this season. In the bullpen, we're just going to highlight their 2 best guys, and that is both Aaron Crow, who's a setup man last year, went 3-1 with a 3.48 ERA, saved 2 games for this team. Solid setup man, and then Greg Holland, who will be the closer. Last year went 7-4 with a 2.96 ERA, saved 16-20 after taking over for Jonathan Broxton, who was dealt, and also Joakim Soria is no longer with the team with all the injury problems that he has had. So I think that this is a pretty solid bullpen for the Royals. Not a great bullpen, but a pretty solid bullpen.
It is totally a young bullpen right now, man. When you look at it, I think the youngest in this bullpen is like 23 years old. I think that's how old Danny Duffy is. But you know what? This team is young. Overall, the bullpen is solid. Last year, it was a total team effort. You just don't want to talk about 2 guys here, Tim. You want to talk about the whole bullpen. But just wrapping it up, you got to give props to Greg Holland, who has really held that bullpen together last year with that good. Looking at the guy. Everybody thinks this guy has a lot of potential being a starting pitcher, but you know what? This guy is a closer. He's built for a closer. He was 16 for 20 with saved opportunities. You wish that he could, put in more and be getting more effort in at the closer's role. I think he has what it takes to be a top closer in baseball. If for you fantasy players out there, if this guy is available, later on in the innings, and you really need a relief pitcher or a closer, you can't go wrong with drafting Greg Holland. Because, he's going to give you a solid ERA. If you looked at last year, 2.96 is pretty decent for a closer in my book. And, you can't go wrong with them. The other guys you really want to highlight in this bullpen, my favorite bullpen pitcher on this team is Nathan Adcock, who's been really improving down in the minor league system. And you know what? This team overall has a phenomenal, minor league team. Their teams are phenomenal. How the player development, how they develop with these players has just been phenomenal.
Yeah, and they're a team that will have a bright future regardless of what they do. But I think that this is the year where the Kansas City Royals really began to turn things around. They went 72-90 last year, but there still were some bright spots, and I think they continue that evolution this year. I think they'll win between 79 and 82 games. They'll probably finish in 2nd or 3rd place, maybe 4th place, depends on how the Indians ultimately do. But I think that this is a 79 to 82 win team. They could ultimately have a winning season, and the future's looking bright. They renovated Kauffman a few years ago. Beautiful stadium, as we saw displayed in the All-Star game last year, and it's it's a team that's headed for a bright future. Them and the Pittsburgh Pirates for a long time have been teams that we look at as this team sucks. These are reasons why the MLB needs a salary cap, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, they've done such a good job of finally turning things around, getting good jobs, as Justin said, developing players in their minor league system, and the futures of both of those teams have become very bright.
Absolutely. I really agree with you 100% there, Tim. The baseball could potentially be getting a salary cap. I hope that could happen. But you know what, these teams, it's just big ups to the minor league development of these players. Because if we did not have, you know, a great solid developmenting of players for the Kansas City Royals, we would not be seeing, you know, the Eric Hosmer, we will not be seeing the Mike Moustakas, we will not even be seeing the Alex Scoring that we see today. We'll be seeing some slump teams, we'll still be having, you know, constant losing seasons from the Kansas City Royals. And you know what? When you looked at the offseason, it was a huge offseason for the team with the additions of James Shields, almost said Jake Shields there, Irvin Santana coming over, and you just gotta have improvement in the pitch rotation from Guthrie, from Santana, and you hope to God that you don't lose Wade Davis. I think he's gonna have is gonna have a lot of getting a lot of attention on him. They just be aware of Wade Davis, and that. Other than that, if this team has what it takes to be a contender, I think this team has a really legit shot of being a contender.
No doubt about it. The Kansas City Royals have a bright future, and we will continue to preview all of the MLB teams this year. Go ahead to my channel and go ahead to the playlist on youtube.com/Mr. Kelstar at The Real Sports Talk, and you will have a list of the playlist of every single MLB team previewed. And if we haven't gotten to every team yet, we are getting to every team slowly. So make sure to check that out. I'm Tim Kelly for Justin Godsey. This is The Real Sports Talk, and Nation Sports Blog presents the 30 Clubs, 30 Previews MLB special. We'll catch you guys later.